On the Brain Possible podcast, we talk weekly with practitioners, parents, caregivers, and experts who share their knowledge on a variety of treatments and issues that matter to you. Our guests today are Cass and Len Arcuri, hosts of the Autism Parenting Secrets podcast and co-founders of Warrior Parent Coaching. Their mission is to empower parents to transform into warrior parents who are better equipped to find answers that are right for their unique child. They believe the greatest gift a parent can give their child is their own transformation into a stronger, calmer, more capable, and more loving version of themselves. Cass understands the body's innate power to heal and specializes in the healing power of food. She's invested over 15,000 hours in the kitchen, creating recipes to accommodate allergies and special diets. Cass is a certified health coach from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition as well. Len is a problem solver and is obsessed with helping other parents identify and address the root cause of anything that's holding them or their child back. He's a certified Human Potential Institute coach who leverages proven productivity tools and biohacking to get results faster with greater ease. Thank you so much for joining me, Len and Cass. It is an honor to finally meet you. I know that we've been Instagram friends and community neighbors for a while now, and I look forward to diving in.
Yeah, we're excited too. And Emily, just thank you for continuing to shine the light that you do for so many.
You too. All right, well, let's just start with your journey. Can you tell me about your family's journey with autism?
Sure. So our son regressed about 1 year old. So the boy who was like the biggest kid, it was 90th percentile for height and weight, and he was thriving. He basically had stopped growing around his 13-month mark. And at that same point, he developed anaphylactic allergies, became allergic to everything, but he also regressed. So he lost his words, he lost his eye contact. To get him to kind of pay attention to us, I had to make like a crazy animal sound. Like he just kind of went into his own world. Our pediatrician didn't think anything of it. She said, he's a boy, he's probably going to be a scientist, which you're like, what? He's like 15 months old, but thank you. But when he was 18 months old, we took it upon ourselves to get him evaluated. We actually had evaluations like almost a day apart with 2 different doctors. He was diagnosed with moderate to severe autism. Len and I were basically told to get therapy for ourselves because his future was going to be limited, and basically it was going to be lifelong, and that the most that we could hope for is life skills. And that kind of set the tone of, how we started into autism.
Wow. Yeah. And what year was that?
That was in 2008. So I was 9 months pregnant with my daughter. I was 3 weeks from delivery when he was diagnosed. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to ruin this poor boy's life. I'm now going to, my attention's going to be between 2 kids, not just him. He needs me. So there was a lot of juggling and chaos kind of going on in our household at that time.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into caring for an exceptional child, but you also focus on the importance of what's going on with the parents. Can you share with us how the child feeds off of the parent?
Len, you want to take this one?
Yeah, no, that's something we did not know early on. And it took us a few years, at least probably 3 or 4 years before that concept even was something that we could entertain, because we were at least I was so focused 100% on fixing my son. When we got the diagnosis, even after that, there was months, years where our son also was failure to thrive. Like he became allergic to everything he ate. He was on a liquid medical food for a year because his body was rejecting everything. And we were just being told that, that there was no, he had severe autism, his severe allergies, and we really were given no hope. So really my entire focus was on, we got the diagnosis, we saw what was happening. Cass and I are both people who are going to do something about it. And so we set off to quote unquote fix our son. And I was convinced we would find the answer, find the quick fix, find the way. because he was broken and needed to be fixed. And that was the
Oh.
mentality. So it took probably only like after 3 or 4 years before it started to dawn on us, as we started to get support from really incredible organizations and people, that we were able to see the impact of how we were striving. And, as much as it was kind of coming from the right place, we wanted to help our child more than anything. It was also, at least for me, stressful, and I was exuding an energy, even though I didn't realize it, of non-acceptance for my son as he was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I guess just to step a little bit back from that too is, we were given the diagnosis. We were told that basically it was broken. We even had, some family members that told us, at least you have one good child, which you were just like, oh my God, knife to my heart. But from that, there was a point that we were like, that's kind of bullshit. We had a nephew who had passed at 6 months old from a rare genetic disease, and watching him, never get bigger than when he was born kind of also set us on our path to be like, what, we are going to find answers for our son. We know, he's here. He might have a diagnosis that we didn't expect and we kind of didn't want, but he's here. At one point he was a big, healthy kid. How can we get him back to where he was? So that was part of it for us as well. There's one thing, and I've shared this before on our podcast, but I was filling out forms at a doctor's office because I thought I could really just hire the best doctors. I could hire the right therapist. I could kind of really support him by bringing other people in versus what I was doing. And I was filling out medical intake forms, which, everyone has their differences. And I was putting occupation. And at the time I had left my career, I was just 100% focused on my 2 kids. And when I filled out the form, instead of writing, mother or whatever, I wrote CEO of Len Arcuri Enterprises, because I was like, what? These people work for me. I don't work for them. And that kind of started our journey to claim a little bit more power as we kind of went through, because as a parent, you get to make choices of who you surround your child with. And that kind of was our first step toward empowerment, even though it took us a couple of years to realize that, holy crap, we were judging our child, when we corrected behaviors or we kind of we showed up in a certain way. And when we released that, as Len said, in that timeline, like 3 to 4 years later, but early on, we did realize that we did have more control, and we knew that, our son did have so many medical issues, and part of our curiosity was, what if we addressed his medical issues? What would that do for their autism? Because so many doctors we met said, GI issues, well, that's just comorbid, that's just part of autism, versus I'm like, okay, what if we fix the GI issues? What will that do for his autism? Because so many of our kids have these underlying medical issues. And instead of just kind of, nicely putting it into a box and kind of just, encapsulating it, we were like, all right, what if we do this instead? And so supporting our son from a health perspective, while still doing other services for him from the autism perspective, was huge for us. And really addressing Rye's underlying medical stuff was a big piece of the earlier part of our journey.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back. Let's not talk about your healing yet. Tell me, after you get this diagnosis, then what? Sounds like you are the type of people, you just started researching right away. Where did you start to find those like little gemstones of information, and what did you do?
So basically the day or two after he was diagnosed, I had a girlfriend who showed up with a stack of books. And I mean, I'm so grateful for Deborah for this forever. By giving us those books, she gave us hope. Because those books, one was like Jenny McCarthy's book on, I forget the name because I've read a few of hers.
It's like Warrior Mother.
No, it was the other, it was the one that preceded, I think like
Oh.
Louder Than Words or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's it.
Yeah, but Warrior Mothers was another one that we read. But the first one was the one that also Len read right away, and Len got on board from the start. So I think 6 weeks after he was diagnosed, Len was attending his first, Dan at the time was Defeat Autism Now conference. And so Len was like one of the only dads at this. I was still, I was home taking care of the kids while he was out there. And so we started to learn more about things like food, things like biomedical interventions, like all of these things that may be impacting our children. So we really started right off the bat, one, supporting him from autism. So I think the first therapist showed up at our house the day after the diagnosis. We had speech, we had behavioral, we kind of jumped in full force. And then after that, food was a huge piece of our journey. And we basically, since maybe a week after diagnosis, we went everything organic, everything non-processed. My son it's easier to list what he's not allergic to versus what he's allergic to. And so we've always embraced food. I mean, 6 months after he was diagnosed, we even sold our house and we moved into a green building that purified our air and water and was made with non-toxic materials, because we were like, let's create a healing bubble for him to truly give him as much, set him up for success as we can.
Wow. I want to hear more about this green building. In 2008, you were in the city still?
Yeah.
Well, we were in Brooklyn and then we moved back into Manhattan, and down in lower Manhattan, there are a collection. There's probably like 5 of them, right in close proximity. And there was one of them that was a rental. And so we moved into that green building. I mean, we went crazy. Like, I had an organic cover made for our couch. We got rid of all of our plates. We went everything to glass. We were like, as we embraced this green lifestyle, like we went full force into that piece too, because we didn't want to add any stressors for him.
Yeah. I get it.
We unfortunately, we had the means to be able to do all that early on, because we took what we were learning in that stack of books and at the conferences. We listened and we bought into the connection that if you improve your environment, both externally and within the body, what you're feeding it, amazing things can happen. And I think the books, especially someone like Jenny McCarthy's book, what just was written in a way that at least related, like I could relate to it. It wasn't a dry, textbook, and it wasn't necessarily just a recounting of someone's experience. There was a lot of practical, perspective shifts. So I think that was the key. Early on, we had really good influences that enabled us to see things from a different perspective, because otherwise I was totally going down the road of, let's not talk about this. Let's fix him before people find out, and do what the doctor says. Who are we to question? Stop Googling stuff, and that type of thing. Because it was coming from a place of protection, but ultimately I could easily see where everything that happened with us could have drove Cass and I apart, because we were both in our own way trying to do what we thought was right, as opposed to casting a wider net, being open to let's just say, popular approaches, and really taking the time to get to know our child and what his unique needs are. I think Cass was ready at the outset to do that, and I was not, for a lot of my own shit that was in the way of me seeing, what the possibilities were. So by going to that conference, also surrounded me with people who this was the norm, the idea of doing non-conventional options. And we came back, and probably for the first couple of years, we tried a whole bunch of things, probably more than would be prudent to do at one time, because we wanted to not leave any stone unturned.
One of our things was never do harm. So
Right.
We always mindfully chose things that, had no downside and potential upside. So It wasn't necessarily like, oh, well, we went crazy and did all of this stuff. No, we specifically always had that check-in to make sure, does this sit right for us and for our family. The other thing that we did probably 2 months after we changed his diet, we also changed ours, because we know that food is one of those things that connect family. And we didn't want to be sitting there eating a sandwich while our son couldn't have bread. Like, we wanted to be all in. So as we lived in the Italian section of Brooklyn with like homemade bread shops and cheese shops around the corner, we went gluten, dairy free with our son, because we wanted that dinner table, to be something that connected us versus kind of separated. And I remember to this day, like, going to Len and being like, honey, we need to, my Italian Sicilian husband, like, sorry, we're giving up, these things. And, I'm lucky in the partner that I chose, because he was all in to do it as well. So, which is, getting parents aligned is a key part of this as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a big part of your coaching. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And a part of our coach, it's amazing because when the parents do our coaching together, it transforms everything. Because one parent can do it, absolutely, but we seem to have it's a specialty of bringing both parents as part of this together, because when parents can truly align from the get-go and see each other and hear each other and get support, that can truly transform so much.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of what makes us unique, having, the male, female perspective, the mom, dad perspective. And we honestly started doing this work knowing we really wanted to serve parents if that was possible, both parents, both partners, but recognizing the reality is usually it's the moms who are usually wanting that support. The dads are doing something else. And so we've been surprised how many people are coming with both mom and dad or partner and partner fully on board. And that's been incredible to see, because that's just definitely not, our experience has always been, it's usually one parent and then the other one isn't fully on board. And there is a disconnect between the two. And, this type of event can absolutely take whatever differences are and magnify them. So getting support to help bring the parents and help them have a language to become aligned, if not for themselves, again, if they're looking at it from what's going to help our child, it's easier to agree to do the work. And it doesn't have to be that difficult to get aligned, to have a common vision and to move forward together instead of separate. And with the gluten-free, dairy-free thing, yes, I loved, greatest pizza place in the world was like a block away. And it wasn't as if Cass said, hey, we're doing this. She said, help me understand the importance of what we were modeling. And from that standpoint, it was easier for me to say, okay, cost benefit, I don't like it, but the benefits of what it's going to do for my family, for my son, for us are worth it. And so then we moved forward hand in hand and really never looked back.
Yes, pizza. that East Coast tri-state area pizza that they don't have in the Midwest and I can't eat anyway. Yeah, I definitely hear you on the parents. And one of the things that struck, or we came to realize a lot when our own son had a diagnosis, is a lot of times parents get torn apart, and it's awesome that you guys can model both of your perspectives and show both of you. So I want to know, you changed your diet and your lifestyle, your environment. Did you at that point start introducing any kind of biohacking?
So we actually, the one thing that happened probably 6 months after actually it was 2 months after we moved into our green building, is we found the first green pediatrician in the US. So and he wasn't taking new patients, but I figured a way how, but I was lucky there was a couple serendipitous events that happened that he then took us as his patients. And having that right quarterback and really partner in this was really important for us, because we could read all these articles, attend all the conferences, but then to also bounce them off of him as it relates to what is right for, our son based on what he saw. So we truly had a partner in this, which was kind of critical and key. But Rye for 3 years basically stopped growing. So he went from 90th percentile to failure to thrive, and all of the medicines that all the different specialists had given him, or even the supplements that he was given, went through him undigested. And so when he got that failure to thrive diagnosis, I was like, no, because that was my nephew's, one of his diagnosis was failure to thrive. So I read a book called Impossible Cure by Amy Lansky, and it was about homeopathy. And I went to our pediatrician, because when I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be such an important part of our journey. And reading that, I went to our pediatrician, and I loved his answer, because he was like, listen, one, with homeopathy, there's no downside. Your body takes from it if it needs it. And two, it's basically, it can basically create miracles. And so we started working with a homeopath, and a couple months into it, and knowing that homeopathy, there's no downside, we were like, all right, this is kind of perfect, and a couple months into it, they gave my son a homeopathic remedy. And within 6 weeks, the boy who didn't grow gained 10 pounds and grew 3 inches in the 6-week time frame.
Wow.
So he grew overnight, because he was like that big 1-year-old in size 2 clothes already, that I already had the 4s in the closet for 3 years waiting for him. And then I was like, all right, so he started to grow. And as he started to grow, the autism, or his, symptoms like head banging or spinning objects, a lot of those behaviors that he had started to go away.
Wow. Well, one, I want to know what that remedy is, but let's go back a second. I've never heard the term green pediatrician.
Well, he opened the first green practice. So he he's an basically integrative pediatrician, but
okay.
At the time, green was one of those buzzwords, because this is 2008. So he opened the first green practice. So everything, sustainably made, built.
The building materials of the office were extremely
Non-toxic.
green, non-VOC, so he created a very, healing or non-toxic space. But otherwise, the practice was more of an integrative. So medical doctor, but open, has more options in its toolbox, including homeopathy, and not kicking people out of the office who suggested it. So we liked that we had a quarterback who had a wider, array of tools to help us decide what was going to be a really good fit for our son. And as Cass said, that was critical, having somebody who was on the team, again, not just telling us what to do, but on the team, helping us as we bounced ideas off about what we thought might be able to help.
And we treated every single doctor's appointment like a business meeting. We had agendas. We had we would even send him articles to pre-read. We went in there like it was our job, because we didn't just want, one thing is, I think a lot of parents I'm paying so much for this doctor should remember me, which is bull crap. They see a lot of patients, and you need to be your own advocate. So we would always have, these agendas. We would also send recaps. We treated it a little bit more like a business meeting, and kind of from a follow-up perspective, because we want to make sure things were always kind of top of mind. And we had Len, with Len's background as process improvement. And so we leveraged so much of his, corporate world skills to kind of really have us set up for success, with having all of, looking at Rye's timeline, what's everything that's happened to him in the past, just so we could have what he is at our fingertips, or the things that have happened to him, or behaviors that we see, or biomarkers that were a little bit off, we always had that at our fingertips because we always just wanted to make sure we weren't missing any details, because I think with details, they allow you to, connect patterns and see what might have happened a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. So how old was Rye when you started seeing this pediatrician? And was the pediatrician the one who was also giving you the remedies?
No, so the pediatrician was not the one that was giving us the remedies, but Rye was 2 when we started with him. And we only left his practice when we moved out of state. Or down to North Carolina. So he was our pediatrician up until Rye was 7 or 8.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Okay. What was the remedy? I want to know, was the purpose? I've heard, I don't have an background at all in autism, and I've read, think of me as like surface level.
Yep. Well, and every child is unique and different, and there's like over 6,000 remedies.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this might be a little controversial, so you can decide if you want to keep it in or not. So when you look back on my son's timeline, all of this stuff happened. He had his 12-month wellness visit, and 10 days later, he went anaphylactic to peanuts. And those 2 events really were kind of the start of the regression. And so the remedy actually was a remedy for MMR. And
like a detox type thing?
I guess a detox. I never questioned what it was. I just knew it was a homeopathic remedy, that the starting materials came from MMR. And when you looked historically, we had titers run, we had all of the information kind of at our fingertips. And if you checked Rye's titers for like rubella, you're supposed to be immune at 0.04. His level was like 180. So that stuff had really set up shop in him. And so that remedy was kind of what worked well for him.
Yeah.
And maybe said another way also, on building on top of what Cass said, homeopathy, it's really, especially if you do classical homeopathy, where they're looking for the one remedy that is the fit for that child. And for us, given Rye's history and the fact that event right after he turned 12 months old, the 1-year checkup, that's when everything crashed. So it wasn't as if anything caused it. I mean, he had been accumulating an overload of a toxic overload that started, pre-birth. And that was just the event, the cascade of events that kind of pushed him over the edge. Mm-hmm. So what homeopathy does, it looks at the timeline. It's looking for the events, the traumatic triggers maybe that need to be addressed first. And so for us, it just happened that a remedy that was based on the MMR vaccine is the one that he had an immediate positive response to, that basically took this downward spiral and immediately corrected it. And we weren't doing any other interventions at the time. It was ridiculously obvious that one remedy made a huge difference for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I was asking about what type of remedy was because I surface level know of homotoxicology, called. And so I know there's like classic, as you just said. And so I was wondering if it was that.
No, we actually interviewed a homeotoxicologist we had a great meeting and everything. And our son, so the one thing is, when Rye was not growing, he was actually pooping 10 times a day. And when he was pooping 10 times a day, like you're not absorbing any nutrients from this. He wasn't growing, like his body stopped doing certain body functions. Like he was, and as our doctor at the time was telling us, he was like, listen, his body's just in survival mode, and he's basically conserving energy for vital functions. So like my son didn't have earwax for 3 years. Like if you put him in the sun, he would never burn. Like there were so many things that his body wasn't doing. But when we met with the homeotoxicologist, it's funny because we're like, he's pooping 10 times a day. And so when we went for her recommendation, she's like, okay, I want to increase his bowel movements. And I was like, didn't you hear what I said? I'm like, he's pooping 10 times a day. No one needs to poop 10 times a day. Like I want him to poop once or twice a day, which is what, a healthy gut will do. So we didn't do homeotoxicology. We ended up with a classical homeopath. And really, because we had detailed information as relates to titers, his timeline, I was able to kind of help point her to what I think might work. And it was funny because we actually stopped working with her pretty soon after that, because she thought she was like one and done. And I was like, oh my God, here's a boy who has many other layers. But over the last decade, homeopathy has been huge for us, huge for our family, because we have found everything more energetic and really, more energetic is really what my son responds to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was raised by a nurse. My grandfather was a doctor. So this was not in the realm of what I knew, but it's what I needed to learn to support my son.
Yeah. Well, I guess that also kind of goes to say that it's not that one, I would argue that one isn't necessarily better than the other, or it's really about that particular practitioner and their knowledge, because one might not be very good.
Right. And, and everybody's unique. So you have to find what works for that unique being, that person, their child, that family, like what feels right for them.
Yeah, in terms of homeopathy or homotoxicology, they're very different. And we just knew our son it would be a more gentler, let's say simpler approach at the time made a lot more sense than something that was maybe a bit more involved. So yeah, not any one is ever better or worse. It's just what's your best guess as to what's the right fit at the time? And for us, classical homeopathy with specifically something that was really super effective for him. We stacked the deck for success, but we also got lucky finding the right person. And we're just, excited that we found something that, his body really responded to well.
That's amazing. So you've got homeopathy, and now he's growing, and some of his symptoms are subsiding. And then what was next on your journey?
During that time, we also discovered like chiropractic care and craniosacral work, because those were also really important. But after that, we basically went from traditional ABA and we switched over to the Sunrise program. And for the Sunrise program was game changing for us as parents, but it was also game changing for our son. The universe actually presented Sunrise to us like 5 different times, and we finally paid attention. And we started by hiring before when they did in-house things, we hired a consultant or one of their teachers to come spend a day with us, because we were getting service. I mean, we had up to 40 hours of services being paid for by the city of New York. Like, we had such amazing support. However, what we ended up finding out, so we hired this woman, she came, spent the day with him. He had the best day he ever had in his life. We all felt really good about it. And so we basically walked away from the services that we had, because Sunrise is all about empowering the parents in how you show up, and they really focus on the sociability piece to it. So Len and I both got trained in Sunrise. We had a babysitter get trained in Sunrise. And at one point, we actually brought our son up. They used to do intensives, and we lived there for a week with him while he got 40 hours or 35 or 40 hours in the playroom just being loved. We got 40 hours working on ourselves. And that week truly changed everything for us.
Wow.
Right. So everything that Cass is saying, by the way, is then shifting it a little bit, right? Because everything up until then we were doing for him, focusing the energy on him. So in looking at the services he was getting, that's what Cass is describing, is we made a shift because we were now noticing more about what could be a good fit for him. And the Sunrise program was, for us, again, it was a child-centered approach, versus the more traditional behavioral therapy, which is more practitioner focused, as opposed to, really letting the child lead. And we felt our son was ready for that. And so that's what this program is. There's a few child-centered program approaches. This is one of them, and one that just, again, happened to be the right fit at the right time.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Oh, it's amazing. So this family back in the early 70s, their 2-year-old son was diagnosed with severe autism. They told him his IQ was less than 30 and that they basically should put him in an institution. And this family just wanted to love their son. They toured all different programs. They didn't like anything they saw, and they just wanted to love him. And one day the son loved to spin plates and flap. And the mother decided to spin a plate and flap with him too. And by she entered his world, and doing this for 3 years. By when he was 5 years old, I think they did like 70 hours a week with him. But when he was 5 years old, he ended up going to kindergarten. He ended up graduating from Brown University with honors. His name's Ron, what's his K Kaufman?
Ron K. Kaufman.
Ron K. Kaufman. He likes his middle initial. And we just recently had him on, but no, it's amazing. And back in 1979, NBC actually made a made for TV movie about their journey. If you meet Ron, like there's no, like he's funny, he's engaging, like there's no sign of autism in this man. And they started getting, once that movie, they started getting requests from other families, and they basically started the Autism Treatment Center of America to really empower parents. And it's not about, they basically train the parent, so the parent then can go train their own, they like to say volunteers, and to really transform lives. And you don't really hear about it as much because it's not, there is scientific data about it, but it's kind of not as mainstream, but it was such an important piece of our journey.
They're a perfect example of an organization that's been doing amazing work for decades. And because they're not marketing geniuses and they're not out there promoting, a lot of people don't hear about them, and they definitely don't hear it as an alternative. And so what Cass is talking about with the plate spinning and the like, that's basically a concept called joining. So if you're a parent, and this is a huge divisive topic within the community, if your child's exhibiting behaviors, traditional therapies are all about stamping out the behaviors. So encourage more of the positive behaviors, discourage the negative behaviors. So what we learned with this organization was the power of joining, where you're doing what your child's doing, even if you don't quote unquote like it, you're doing it to enter their world. Because, and this is getting to, I think, a key thing that I love talking about in terms of the goal shift that happened for us. If your goal is to fix your child, then joining in their quote unquote bad behaviors makes no sense because you want those gone. But if your goal, instead of fixing your child, is to form a bond and to connect with your child, to enter their world, as Cass mentioned, then the best way of doing that is to do the shit that they like to do. And our son, and if you do it sincerely, then the child can't help but feel more connected to you because you're doing the things that they like to do. And so that's why that particular approach just, again, was a really good fit for us. And then on top of that, they worked to help us see for the first time, really, that how we were operating, and to your point earlier, Emily, or your question, how we were rubbing off on our child. So if we were stressed and if we were upset when we didn't get what we wanted and we were modeling that, then we shouldn't really expect that to be something that our child's going to develop. And so if we were stressed, then he was going to be receiving a parent that is kind of unsafe, right? It's you're not creating that atmosphere or environment for connection and love and acceptance. So at least I had to transform from non-acceptance, what my son's doing now is not okay, he has to be fixed, to really sincerely accepting him as he was and doing the stuff he liked to do as a way of forming the connection with him, so that then he might actually follow my lead with teaching him the things that he needed to learn to be able to communicate and engage and socialize. So it was that organization was one of the key things to do both, to help us with the connection with our son and to show us how we were operating, that he was feeding off of all that energy. And so we had to transform first before he could be expected to then follow suit. And that's why we do what we do now.
Yeah. And it ultimately comes down to safety, right? So you want your kids to feel safe. And if they're being judged, like, hell, I don't want to be friends with someone who judges me. Like our kids, my son didn't want to be friends with me. I think the first time, besides just being his mother and his caregiver, but the first time he truly trusted me in this whole journey was when we were actually up at sunrise during that intensive, because I was in the playroom with him and they were all watching to see how I interacted with him. And my son taught himself when he regained his words. We had done sign language with him. We did this "your baby can read" DVDs things, and we had speech therapy. So he learned how to speak, sign, and spell, like all within that same time frame. And reading came right after that. So he taught himself how to read around 2.5, 3. And so we were up in the sunrise playroom, and he was reading a sentence, but he loved to read things wrong. And he was about 5 years old at this time. And so he was reading it wrong and I was correcting him, and they pulled me out of the room. They were like, "Why are you correcting him? He's trying to take you somewhere. Go with him." And so during that week, like 55 times, I said that sentence wrong. And on the 56th time, he smiled. And it was like I finally passed his litmus test, because on the 56th time when he smiled, he actually said the sentence right. And the sentence, I just have to share because it's like too good. The sentence was from this Jane Goodall children's book, but the sentence was, he wanted me to say "observered the miracle," but the sentence is "observed the miracle." And I'm like, of course my child picks this as his sentence. But like, he knew I was there for him. He knew I was willing to go where he wanted me to go. And that changed everything. And even that week, the little boy who was a great sleeper, he started running into our beds in the middle of the night, and he had to touch us. And this was just kind of recreating that safety again for him. And I think he was in our bed for like close to 4 years, but we decided not to judge it because we felt like it was something that he innately needed to know that he wasn't in this world alone.
Oh, I guess that sounds like a bit of a mind trip for you, because you're being told, do this, go along with it, and then it'll help. But I can imagine that maybe you would be like, okay, I'll go along with it. But in the back of your mind, you're still like, so when is it going to help?
Right. And that's where you have to shed all those expectations, because that's where, when you're actually truly show up your authentic self, and because our kids in this with autism, I just know are like pure souls who can call BS whenever they want to, because they are so, and at that time basically too is when we shifted to realize that Rye's here to be our teacher. I'm not here to be his teacher. And there was kind of a surrendering that had to happen at that time frame.
Is that what so you went to an intensive? Is this like a retreat?
Well, you go live up there at the Autism Treatment Center of America. Mm-hmm. And they basically have a couple small cabins. So you mm-hmm. had your bedroom, you had your child's bedroom, there's a kitchen, but then there's what they have is a playroom. And so we basically lived there, and it was their focus was 100% on supporting us. So they had teachers in there working in the playroom, playing with Rye. They had other people working with us to kind of help us shed some of those limiting beliefs that weren't helping our child.
Yeah, wow. They weren't working on our son at all.
No, they played with him.
The only reason he was there is so they could watch us and to help give us feedback and help us see our blind spots about things, how we were operating that wasn't helping. And that's why it's an approach that not many people take, because, when you get the diagnosis as a parent, it's easy for you to get your head around the fact, okay, I need to find experts to work on my child. And you're already fried, traumatized, demoralized, whatever the case may be, to then be told, okay, now you need to do a lot of work on yourself. What parent's going to raise their hand excitedly to do that? And I'm appreciative that for whatever reason, we were in a position where we were able to see the value of it, because I could easily see why a lot of people would never ever consider it, because they just can't even fathom how they're going to work that in addition to all the other challenges they may be experiencing.
Yeah, in everyday life, just being a parent in general.
That's right. That's right.
It's like, is there a solution for that? Because that doesn't involve me. Um, wow. So that sounds really healing. Thank you for sharing about that. And people can find therapists or teachers, trainers for this
They
method
basically do
around?
everything now online,
Okay.
and it's all about empowering the parent. So there are online courses, they have workshops. So this is where parents can be supported now virtually, and the virtual is definitely it's more affordable. But the one thing is, so many parents, from a financial perspective, autism is absolutely can be very expensive, and a lot of parents are looking for what's covered by insurance versus necessarily, wait, you mean I have to do the work? So this is where you have to kind of come up with what is that right plan or strategy for your child. So Sunrise itself isn't, I don't, maybe FSA, you could do FSA as relates to paying for the course, but you just have to come up with what's your plan, get volunteers. We've had parents who are Sunrise families that we support, and one mom didn't have her own program, and within a week she had 10 volunteers ready to show up to support her child. So she wasn't alone in this, and because she got volunteers, it wasn't costing her anything. So this is where you just have, it's a different program than what, is kind of typical and what, insurance might cover.
It's kind of like homeopathy in the sense that if you're only focused on conventional medical options, homeopathy blows your mind because it's so different. This approach, the Sunrise program, and there's other child-centered approaches out there, they're the road less traveled. So what we encourage parents in our coaching and what we put out there is to be aware more of what your options are to see what's a good fit for your child. Because otherwise, if you follow the standard quote unquote autism path, there's very few options, and there's a whole lot of pressure to do X, Y, and Z, the expected interventions. And we like to just help encourage parents to become aware, kind of like what your organization does, Emily, to become aware more of unconventional things that could be a better fit for their child and their family.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. And I'm also aware that I'm still learning nonstop. Just got a new one today that needs to go on the treatment list. But I don't think certainly all of these treatments, I don't know how many we have on our site, let's say 60. They are not, I do not think people should do 60 treatments. Nope. It's just, I think that it's important that people know that these things exist, and then they can make a choice for what's right for them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'd like to, we've already eaten up so much time. I could talk to you guys for hours, but I wanted to ask you guys and change the subject a little bit. It seems society is slowly becoming aware of the gut health connection, but what about teeth and dental care? I know that you guys recently had a podcast about this. What role does this play in health and dealing with autism?
It's such a big piece of it. And it's funny because one of the interventions we found, only a couple years ago, which was really like at 11 years old, we were given something new, which we thought we had, discovered, but the palate of our children, the tongue position of our children, the tongue ties of our children, the dental, what they eat, of course, influences what toothpaste they use can also be, because there's so many hidden ingredients in toothpaste. And so and knowing that, the mouth is really the starting point of the gut. As our last podcast, we interviewed Trina Felber, and she was saying how it's, tongue to tail. And so you really have to think about as that mouth is that starting point for it. So like our son was recently, so at 11, he was diagnosed with deviated septum that we didn't even know about, but his tongue position was completely off and his palate had never formed right in utero. And if your tongue isn't resting on the roof of your mouth, you're perpetually kind of in fight or flight because you never have that kind of closed circuit, and you're never at a state of calm. And what was cool about this is I had so much dental work as a child growing up, and our son at the point, because I did not want to put my son under for any kind of teeth things. We're lucky he has really strong teeth, because there are, once you especially know your child's genetic SNPs and things, like some kids can't process like laughing gas, or other things that you think just are standard care in dental. But finding this out for our son was huge. And so the boy who had shark teeth, because a front and tooth came back together, when we did this, what is called an advanced light force appliance in his mouth, it's a tiny little wire that goes behind the teeth, and it basically puts the palate how it should have formed in utero. All of those double teeth, actually everything fell into place. So my son, all his teeth are now straight. He won't need braces, all of the things. It was amazing just putting the structure into the place where it should have been from the start, back into place. It was amazing. And he actually, when we took out that little tiny wire that you could never see, he actually was sad to see it go, and it was really interesting, but it was huge for us. We also used it for our daughter, who doesn't have a developmental delay, but she had, a different kind of bite. So she doesn't need braces either. And as the dentist explained it to us, it's how do you basically support the mouth to be what the mouth should have been in the first place.
So I know a little bit about this because I'm working on some dental stuff with my own children. This is something that they had to install in the mouth, and it stayed there until they removed it.
Yep. It was just a tiny little wire. And there's a great, on Epidemic Answers, there's a great presentation that you can kind of see on it. But yeah, tiny wire that you basically get adjustments so it's easy for them to take out, but it never fell out for our kids. And our kids had it in for about a year and a half. So yeah, it was
for any autism parent of a child with autism who's listening, it's there's no way my kid's going to let anything like that. It really is hardly noticeable. So it's not like a retainer or something like that. It's really subtle. And we were amazed our kids were totally fine with it. And yeah, so it's the ALF, the Advanced Light Force Appliance. Again, something that not hardly anybody really knows about. But for us, because of the fact that our son, as much as he's progressed incredibly, the idea of him still being kind of ramped up and kind of under a fight or flight, this was a way of alleviating that pressure, the neurological pressure, through structurally changing the position and opening up the airway so he's getting more oxygen. So for us, that's why this made sense. But dental, we've learned, is even more important, because a lot of what kids use, ultimately is toxic. And that toxic exposure to the wrong toothpaste or dental products gets in the gut. And if you buy in the fact that the gut's important and it does affect and impact brain health and performance, which is very well proven now, the mouth is a key area not to overlook, because there could be things that you're doing that you don't realize might be contributing to a more toxic environment.
Well, so I know I've explored a few toothpastes. I have my current favorite, which I don't think that I will find another I like better. But what are you loving right now?
Oh my God, I'm loving my Primal Life tooth powder.
So Primal Life Organics.
Or Primal Life Organics.
Trina Felber.
But I started using it. Len was at the Dave Asprey biohacking conference, and he sent home a package and it was this, and I started using it and my mouth has never felt cleaner. And she started the powder to help her own daughter remineralize a natural cavity she had. And her daughter, what was supposed to be a 3-month filling, ended up lasting her 10 years. So because her tooth remineralized around the cavity.
Wow.
So yeah, I love the tooth powder that they have.
And do your kids use that as well?
They do.
They do now. There's a company called Frau Fowler, and they also make kind of very clean, non-toxic products. And they also have tooth powder. So those are two, Primal Life Organics and Frau Fowler, that we'd like. And be curious to know which is your favorite right now, Emily.
Oh, I'm liking, I think it's called Risewell.
Oh yeah, I have that too. My dentist recommended that.
Yeah, I like it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And my kids like it.
The one ingredient in that Trina talks about is glycerin. So that was the only reason that one isn't as high, but she was saying how glycerin is something that you just want to be really careful of.
Not that it's toxic. It just creates kind of like a shield on the tooth that might prevent you from being able to mineralize the teeth with the right powders and the like. So no, but we've heard great things about that brand as well.
Well, that's good to know. Now I'm going to have to try yours. So where can parents begin in working with you?
Well,
go ahead, Len.
No, go ahead, Cass.
No, so we have two. One thing is we wanted to be able to give parents a free resource, which is why we have our podcast, Autism Parenting Secrets, with new episodes that come out every Thursday. And that is truly about empowering parents with information that's really the secrets, quote unquote, which is why the name, that we learned on our journey. That we continue to learn on our journey, because I think journeys, you never keep learning, which I think is so important for parents. It's not like, it's a race and a finish line. This is a journey, and you can always do something to keep improving. I know a Not Been was big for you. We recently started a Not Been for us, and we love it. We actually have a practitioner in our town, which we're amazing. So, there's never an end spot, but the other place that parents can find us, they can go to autismparenting-secrets.com, and that you have the ability to schedule a one-on-one complimentary coaching, not coaching call, discovery call with us. And then we also have a private community of parents that we support as well.
That's awesome. When did you start this?
So we started supporting parents almost 3 years ago. And we have had our podcast out for now a year and a half.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We've been actually empowering and supporting parents since our journey started. Whoever was behind us, we were trying to share.
Right.
We've been perpetually sharing information, but to do it, and we both, Cass and I, walked away from our corporate careers to do this work now, because we know this is the work we were called to do. But the podcast, we call it Secrets, Autism Parenting Secrets, but it's not about, hey, do this or do that. We really are mindful about not putting ourselves on a pedestal to tell people what to do. But what we've learned is that in navigating the journey and finding answers for your child, what you do is totally up to you and what's a fit for your family. But there is a better way of navigating. There's ways of operating that help you to feel better and to find answers to problem solve and to make better decisions. And so really the podcast is all about sharing those insights about how to navigate. And it includes things like mindset, checking in on your beliefs, getting more clarity, understanding your options, allowing yourself to trust your intuition, which is a real big challenge. So we share things like that and give practical ways that people can take action and put it into effect, which is why we're designing the podcast to be kind of a masterclass that anybody can go through. And it's our way of having a not-for-profit in the sense of just take this and because we know parents don't need us to give them anything. They already have the power within them. But we inadvertently operate in ways that we kind of get in our own way sometimes. So we're trying to help shed the flashlight on what parents might be doing that is helping and they can do more of, and what might be getting in the way that just with some awareness and the right support, they can really kind of transcend and get to a much higher, stronger level to do whatever it is that they want for their child. If it's about finding interventions, great, they'll be in a better position to figure out what works. If it's about not doing interventions and just being more present and loving with a calmer nervous system, that's fantastic as well. So we know there's an opportunity for progress, both for the child and the parent. And that's what we're trying to do with the podcast. We do coach parents one-on-one, particularly couples, and we do that. And
when we do that, it's intensive. Like we do a 12-week intensive with parents because we want them, so many things as we started our journey, like we were told it was going to take 6 months and 3 years later, you're still doing the same thing. So our whole goal is to empower parents and to empower them fast. And the amazing thing that we have seen on this journey is when the parent really truly steps into their power, we keep seeing ATEC scores, which Autism Treatment Evaluation Checklist, which is what, a standard online free assessment that you can take. So we have, the parents that we support, what's the ATEC at the start? What's the ATEC at the end? And we keep as the parent score rises, we keep seeing ATEC scores drop, which is so, amazing. What we have witnessed, because this isn't about us, this is about the parents that we support. What we have witnessed with the parents that we have supported we've witnessed miracles, which is just amazing.
Yeah, because we measure the parents. So when we start, we measure them. We have a kind of a proprietary way of assessing their power level, how that whole way of navigating, we can measure it. And so we measure at the beginning and middle at the end. And as the parents rise in terms of how they're operating, it's amazing to see how directly the child does benefit, whether it's in a drop in that ATEC score, that autism score, or again, whether that parent, even if their child stays the same, the experience between the parent and the child totally transforms when the parent has that understanding of how they're operating, what that's doing, and how much of it, which is 100%, is within their control to actually change in a way that they feel good about. So we provide the space for them to do that.
Well, you mentioned miracles, so I want to know, can you share a favorite story or miracle?
Oh man, there's a few. Miracle. I think, okay. I believe, at least I believe as it relates to my son, that our children are truly spiritual beings, and they come and they're here on purpose and they are here for reasons. When my son was, like I mentioned, when he was like 2.5, he taught himself how to read. But when he was 4, I remember grabbing the junior Bible he was given when he was baptized off the shelf, thinking this would put my kid to sleep. And I paused midway through a sentence and my son finished the whole rest of the story word for word. So he had memorized this children's Bible without us even knowing that he had ever read it. And so we started going to church. And there was an incident a few years ago where a woman came up to tell my son what a beautiful job he did saying the Lord's Prayer. And he wanted to shake her hand, which he did. And then he asked if he could give her a kiss. And she looked at me and I was like, he never does this, so go for it. So he kissed her. And then he actually went and got holy water. And he actually sprinkled it on her head. And Len and I were just standing there and I whispered to Len, I said, Len, if she's sick, we just witnessed something bigger than us. 2 weeks later, she found us back at church and she looked like a different person, but she's like, I have to tell you that I have cancer and I thought I was going to die. And she's like, but God spoke to me through your son and I know I'm going to live. 8 months later, she came off the prayer list at church and she had found us 2 weeks again later and told us that basically 5 oncologists had declared she was cancer free. So this is where our kids have they are souls on purpose. This is where there are so many lessons to learn, and they truly are our teachers. But it's really for each parent to embrace their child, where they are, what they need, what clues are they sharing for them. I love when you talk about possibilities. The diagnosis is a stinking piece of paper. It doesn't give you the prognosis of what's possible. And so really going after what's in your heart for your child is what truly matters.
Oh, that's beautiful. Gave me chills. And I have to ask how Rye is today.
So we don't evaluate him that often, but his last diagnosis, he was noted as mild. So he went from moderate to severe to mild. He is 14 years old, almost 15. And he's just pure joy. Like, he is just thriving. We're still doing little things to support him. Like I mentioned, we're doing a not Danielle, we just started low-level neurofeedback. So we still support him as he needs to be supported, but I know his future will be whatever he wants it to be. And he's here to kind of shine his joy for others.
Yeah, we haven't had him assessed formally just because we don't see any point in it. The idea of the label was useful early on for certain things, for services, et cetera. But now I'd be curious, but with this autism treatment evaluation checklist, when we started the journey, he was around a 78. And the higher the score, let's say, the more affected the child is, the more on the spectrum they are. And so he started off at a 78, and over the course of a decade, he's now down to like a 4 or a 5 on that scale. And I think under 20 or even under 10, you're considered off the spectrum. So at least I don't consider him really to be on the autism or formally having autism, but he has some OCD. He's got like some repetitive, he's got like a lot of us. So he's got certain things that can improve over time. And we're just trying to support him, nothing crazy, but just like, hey, this could help just for him to be calmer, even more comfortable in his skin. And it's that kind of progression, which is what we were called to help other parents make this transformation. So the other miracle I'll quickly share is with, one of our clients who this couple did it together when they started. When we talk about the score, the mom, let's say, was at a 44 when she started in terms of how she was on a scale of 0 to 100. On our scale, she was a 44. And we aim to get parents to around a 75 or higher. And we consider them at that point, they're kind of operating what we call a warrior parent, where they're really moving on all cylinders. So this mom and dad did it together. She started off as a 44. At the end of the 12 weeks, she progressed to a 97, which was an incredible leap. So we were doing cartwheels for her, but then her son, who she was doing all this work for, he started the program, and I'm looking at it now. He started at a 72.
Okay.
And by the end of the 12 weeks, the son was at an 18. So that's just a massive drop in a short amount of time. That does not happen.
But the cool thing about that example too, is I actually had the mom do an ATEC score probably 10 months after that point. So basically with under a year, this ATEC score went from a 72 to an 8. Which is just, you're excited with a couple points dropped. Like, this was just, witnessing that miracle. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you for all that you do and the information that you are putting out in the world for everyone to learn from. Is there anything else that you would like to say to the Brain Possible community today to be complete?
I guess the only other thing out there that I have to mention in the autism space is that parents often are under the pressure that you basically need to get your child to where you want them to be by the time that they're 5. It's called the window, and you have a window of opportunity. And the window of opportunity, no way. Like, if you're a parent who's going after, like, you can break a window. So there is no window. Most of our son's progress came after he was 5. And so for a parent under that, they're adding that extra pressure for themselves. I just want them to know that there is no time limit. Progress is possible at any age, and it's just supporting your child as they need to be supported.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
And to that point, the only thing I'd throw out is you asked about biohacking, Emily, and that is kind of a passion of mine now. But early on, what really made a huge difference is that when we went to those doctor's visits, we didn't go kind of saying, hey, what do you think? We went in with an idea of what we thought the root cause was of whatever our son was exhibiting, whether it was physical or behavioral. So that root cause focus, which is now the root of functional medicine, you find functional medicine doctors, this is what they do. But having that really at the forefront and then really taking actions and knowing how it aligns to what you think the root cause is just a really important aspect of navigating in a way that focuses your energy and increases the likelihood that you'll find things that are supportive, because otherwise you run the risk of trying to do anything for the sake of doing it. And that's just never a recipe for success.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was an honor to speak with you. I know that your time is valuable, and I appreciate you spending it here with me today at the Brain Possible.
Thank you.
Totally our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brain Possible podcast. Be sure to tune in every Wednesday for more empowering wisdom, expert advice, and inspiring stories. And be sure to subscribe and follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. And if you feel inspired, we would love for you to rate and review us so that we have the opportunity to reach more people. You can also visit thebrainpossible.com for more information on conditions, therapies, products, and practitioners that can help your family in their journey. Thank you for spending your precious time with us at The Brain Possible. See you next week and be well.